Mr. Mayor, we're live.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Welcome everybody to the council meeting of Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. Before we'll call the meeting to order, just a few housekeeping items I want to cover off before we get into the agenda. Please turn your cell phones off while in chamber. And when, if anyone comes to the mic to speak, please adjust so you're speaking directly in the end of the mics, as this is being recorded and live streamed for those at home. The Township of Oro-Medonte acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people and ancestral territory of the Huron-Wendat. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, the Ojibwa, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. It continues today as the home for diverse Indigenous people, including the historic Métis community in Penetangwisheen. The Anishinaabe people continue to have an enduring relationship with this land, specifically the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, the Chippewa Tri-Council, and the Williams Treaties First Nation. The Huron-Wendat Nation also continues to pay respect and protect the ancestors and heritage on this land. We honor the Indigenous history and culture that has thrived for millennia in this territory and the treaties that bind us together as partners in the spirit of a shared, sustainable, and prosperous future. We are all treaty people. Our commitment begins by acknowledging the truth so that we can move forward together towards reconciliation. Make which. Madam Clerk, may we have a draft motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved that the agenda for the council meeting of Wednesday, January 28, 2026 be received and adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. May we have a motion to go past 4 hours if necessary, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Young. Be it resolved that Rule 14.20A, as per the procedural bylaw number 2023-043, be suspended in order to allow the meeting to proceed past the 4-hour adjournment requirement if necessary.
All in favor? That is carried. And are there any pecuniary interests to close at this time? Councillor Bard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Possibly. There's a design for a drainage project on Ward Avenue and Joy Avenue, which may or may not impact a family member's property, but the design hasn't been completed, so I don't know at this time.
Okay. We're making no decisions on anything today, so if you want to err on the side of caution, it's your choice. You can push your chair back from the table and defer from commenting on it this time, and then we can get clarity for the next meeting when we actually ratify the budget. I believe would be a safe course of action. Madam Clerk, would you agree?
Mr. Mayor, it's entirely up to the councillor as to how he proceeds with the conflict of interest or the potential conflict of interest.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. We have no closed sessions. May we have a draft motion for the 2 sets of minutes, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that the draft minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday, January 14th, 2026, and special council meeting held on Wednesday, January 14th, 2026, be received and adopted as printed and circulated.
All in favor? And that is carried. Just 2 things. We're awaiting Councillor Shell to arrive in chamber. Councillor Young is in chamber. We're just getting. Are you on now? Okay, thank you. So, but Councillor Shell is en route from our understanding, so he will be joining us shortly. We called the vote on that, right? So now there are no recognition of achievements, no public meetings, no deputations. We're really just dealing with the budget today. Is there anyone registered to speak in open forum today?
No, Mr. Mayor, there is not.
Okay, and we currently don't have any public members in the chamber. So we were now on item just want to make sure we're on item 11, reports of municipal officers for action, which is the 2026 budget recalibration presentation. I will start. I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we're attempting to accomplish today before handing it over to staff. So the focus of today's meeting is to present the township's 2026 operating and capital budget recalibration. Although the budget will be presented and considered under the strong mayor powers, I want to reiterate the development of the budget was a collaborative effort between council, the township senior staff team, the CAO, and staff. The township follows a multi-year budgeting approach. In 2025, council endorsed a 2025 and 2026 budget together. The budget recalibration reflects the collective work of council and staff to align the township's resources with our 2024 to 2027 strategic plan and focus on infrastructure and asset management investment that protect the township's long-term sustainability, strengthening the township's human resources to support service excellence and organizational capacity, strategic technology initiatives that modernize operations and improve customer service, maintaining and enhancing service delivery while managing significant cost pressures, including the rising cost of goods, and fulfilling the objectives of the strategic plan. The 2026 budget recalibration also addresses unforeseen expenditures, including the cost associated with the unprecedented March 2025 ice storm and the increases to the OPP policing costs on an annual basis. At this point, the draft budget considers only 60% of the anticipated ice storm recovery funding. The township anticipates the receipt of the remaining funds in either Q2 or Q3 of 26. Receipt of these funds would place the township in a favorable 2025 year-end variance, and any surplus will be directed to the reserves. The township has received correspondence from Minister Flack communicating that the township will receive compensatory agreements reflecting the amount set out in the framework agreement previously approved by the City of Barrie on October 1st, 2025, and subsequently considered by each council earlier this fall. The funding was not planned for the 2025-2026 budget and will be directed to the township's reserve upon receipt to further stabilizing the township's long-term finances and asset management needs. The draft budget conservatively assumes this funding over a 5-year period. However, the township anticipates this funds in 2026, reflecting the agreement put forward by the City of Barrie and endorsed by this township. The recalibration budget positions the township to remain agile, well prepared, and advancing the remaining objectives of the strategic plan while retaining flexibility needed to respond to emerging challenges and opportunities. Council staff remain focused on building a strong foundation for Oro-Medonte, including rebuilding the township's reserve funds as we evolve from a small rural community into a sustainable, prosperous, and well-planned mid-sized municipality. And just to kind of bring clarity, at the conclusion of today's presentation, Council will have the opportunity to consider and discuss 3 motions. The first motion will be to receive today's budget presentation. The second motion is to consider a proposed reduction of $352,653 to the capital levy contribution not reflected in the current draft 2026 budget, which would result in an overall 2026 recalibration blended tax reduction to 3.3%. This will provide a balanced approach, recognizing the $10.155 million received from the City of Barrie and the current economic environment, which will provide tax levy relief while remaining focused on building reserves to ensure the township's long-term fiscal account stability. The third motion for council to consider at the end of the meeting will be to reduce the budget amendment time period as set out in subsection 7.3 of OREG 53/22 to make an amendment to the proposed budget from 30 days to 12, which would be February 4th, 2026. This will allow any amendments to be brought forward for council's consideration at the February 11th, 2026 meeting. So at this time, I would like to pass the floor over to CAO Binns and Ms. Johnson. If you would like to proceed with the budget presentation, it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, and a great summary and overview of what's before council today, through you to council and the community that may be watching. First, I'd like to just start in maybe highlighting a couple key differences in the recalibration versus what was presented to council previously in 25 and 26. The first has to do with the structure of the Municipal Services Corporation, which effective January 1st, 2025, all of the assets have been transferred to the MSC, and there'll be a separate budget for the MSC, which will be presented to council in a following meeting. So those expenditures that were previously in environmental services related to the services provided by the MSC are now excluded from the budget. So that's the first significant difference. The second was what the mayor alluded to in his introductory remarks, was the changes associated with the Strong Mayors and Building Homes Act. Legislatively, there's a number of procedural changes in how a budget works through the Strong Mayors process, how amendments are tabled, and how a budget is deemed to be adopted. And the draft resolution that the mayor tabled, there is information in the presentation, and there's been reports to council on those timelines. There's elements for council's consideration, and then there's elements for the mayor's consideration, and it is a bit dynamic and fluid depending on those amendments that are brought forward. So I just wanted to highlight those two changes as a starting point. There is additional background information for context in the slides that speak to what's legislatively required, and as I mentioned, council does have the ability to reduce, as does the mayor through a notice of decision. So before we get into the detailed presentations, I just wanted to highlight the presentation that really what we've tried to do is look in the rear view mirror in terms of what we've experienced in 25, and Mayor Greenlaw spoke about the ice storm in the city of Barrie, some significant challenges for the municipality. To look at the current view of where we are now versus what we planned for in 2026, and then to look forward to 2027 and beyond with a lens of continuous improvement and preparing the township for its future requirements. And I'd just like to acknowledge my colleagues around the table here for really digging into those elements. And you'll see through the presentation there's a number of significant challenges just from the planned business plan for 2026 to the recalibrated business plan. And the team really dug into their budgets to look at every opportunity to increase revenue and find some savings to be able to address that, and pull together the draft budget. So thank you to my colleagues and the team. The next component I'm going to turn over to Ms. Johnson just to provide a bit of a summary of the 2025 and 2026 budget process.
Thank you, CAO Binns. So slides 7 to 11, we're just going to summarize multi-year budget context and the recalibration rationale. The original 25-26 multi-year budget was approved by council on April 29th, 2025. It provided planned blended tax increases, which incorporated the township, county of Simcoe, and education, Simcoe's county school board. These increases were set at 4.07% for 2025 and 3.98% blended for 2026, the original 26 budget, which was equivalent to $40.71 per $100,000 of residential assessment. Under the Municipal Act, municipalities must recalibrate the remaining years on a multi-year budget each year, which includes this year, the 26 budget year. These slides outline why this year's recalibration is needed and how the township's outlook has changed over the past year. We've seen notable changes. We've seen shifts in service needs, updated revenue patterns, and new pressures following the 25 ice storm that happened. Instead of rebuilding the budget, this recalibration updates the existing plan and uses the best information available. Our priorities remain the same. Financial sustainability, better services, stronger staff capacity, and alignment with council's strategic plan. The plan does continue to guide investments in financial resilience, transparency, employment readiness, and community safety. On to you, Sean.
I just want to highlight a couple elements, and one, I think, and we've talked to council about this in the past, that the budget really is a plan, and there's a lot of uncertainty in our operating environment that will cause us to come back to recalibrate the plan and ensure that we're capitalizing on opportunity, and at the same time we're prepared for some of the challenges that lie ahead. So really, flexibility is key. I think Shannon spoke about alignment and aligning the resources with council's strategic plan. And when we look in the rearview mirror, I think it's important to highlight and recognize all of the accomplishments that have been made. And that's really, I think, a testament to alignment with council's goals and council's leadership, to the focus of operations and the needs of the community. So it's always really impressive, I think, to look at what we've been able to achieve collectively as a small but mighty team. We have included some elements from the report card, and as Ms. Johnson highlighted, this is the last year of the strategic plan, and those remaining elements are focus of the continued focus of the business plan into 2026.
This midterm snapshot highlights the progress made so far and reinforces the township's commitment to long-term financial sustainability. Over the past year, major structural improvements were completed, including key compliance work, updates to the asset management plan that was done, service level update in August. We had a revised procurement policy that we brought to council for their approval in September of 2025. We've had progress on the development charges study and the background study that was approved in October of 2024 that continues to fund, to ensure our growth, does ensure to continue to pay for growth. Significant financial modernization has also taken place. The Dynamics GP ERP system has been reconciled, a new chart of accounts has been implemented, and new departmental structures have been realigned to capture the costs accurately. These changes you're going to see in many of the departments' operating summaries. They're that better of realignment, facilities, fleet, and IT are now at a full 100% cost recovery, where the costs are now charged out to the internal departments and the revenue brought back to those support programs to better reflect the costs related. Risk reduction measures such as dispute resolution, updating planning and building fees, the AMPS implementation, and joining the county insurance pool have reduced our exposure and will generate over $1 million in savings over the next 5 years through the county insurance pool. With more than 1.7 million in grant funding secured and foundational work underway on our long-term financial plan, our financial sustainability is being advanced as continuous efforts. Over the past year, the township has strengthened our community engagement, made it easier for residents to participate in local decision-making. Coordinated education and engagement programs were launched to help people understand the township services, planning processes, and the annual budget. A new online platform now provides a more accessible way for residents to share their input, especially on major planning projects like the comprehensive zoning bylaw review and short-term rental discussions. Together, these actions show a clear focus on improving our communications and strengthening our engagement and building trust by ensuring residents can see how their input shapes the township's decisions. Slide 25.
As I mentioned, I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of the respective areas because there's a lot to highlight, and I think I would just state that there has been a lot accomplished, and as Ms. Johnson alluded to, many are foundational elements that have set the township up for future success with a strong foundation. I will shift to slide 31 and maybe turn it back over to Ms. Johnson to give us a bit of a summary of 2025.
These slides outline the financial impact of the March 2025 ice storm on the 25 year-end's anticipated results. And just what happened during that time frame, as you can see, where the impact of the ice storm affected the township and the damage that was created. The storm did create more than $6.3 million in unexpected costs across operations, forestry, fire response facilities, equipment rentals, and fuel. The township's application to the Municipal Ice Storm Assistance Program was approved for up to $5.8 million, with 60% of the funding received in anticipated to be received in 2026. We did receive the commitment letter, as mentioned by the mayor, that we would be receiving the 60% of the funding, with eligibility to receive the remaining 40%. We're still waiting to hear that or receive that formal commitment letter from the province, but they have issued the fact that we are eligible for that remaining 40%. And upon that 40% recovery, the anticipated year end then would be in a surplus of 1.9 million, and that surplus would then be directed to reserves. Currently, we show the anticipated year end to be 370,000 deficit, but with that additional 40%, the township would then be an anticipated 1.9 million surplus, which then would be directed to reserves.
I just want to highlight a couple other key elements from 2025. In September of this year, I think all of council was on hand for the opening of the Simcoe Woods Community Center, a new elementary school and community center partnership in Horseshoe Valley. From a budgetary perspective, it is a fairly significant increase with a new facility coming online. The 2025-2026 budget assumed a $213,000 transfer from reserves. So that was to smooth the cost coming in. The recalibration has revised that so that we have it's essentially been cut in half to $106,875. And the reason for that is to reduce the 2027 burden of the capital funding operation. So that would be smoothed in 2027. We spoke a little bit about the Barrie boundary adjustment. Another impact that you'll see on the revenue side is a decrease in the township portion of tax revenue. That equates to about 64,000 in 2026. And as Mayor Greenlaw highlighted in his introductory remarks, we do have communication that's on council's agenda today from the minister that recognizes the compensation to be addressed through a compensation agreement reflecting the $10,155,000 that was agreed to by the city of Barrie in October, that would see those funds come in a lump sum payment to the township upon transfer. So we're waiting for direction on that. We've also included some background information on the City of Orillia boundary adjustment. That process started a number of years ago, but will be an area of focus for the municipality into to 26 and possibly 2027. Shannon, I don't know if you want to highlight, you spoke previously about some of the variances here. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yep. So as mentioned, the March ice storm did significantly affect the anticipated final position as shown in the slide. But the operating results reflect both, at this point, reflect the 60% that we've received in provincial funding. It does reflect that. And as I mentioned, it does not reflect the 40% at this time. When we do receive the commitment letter, that will be recognized in 2025 as a receivable, and then we'll adjust the year-end balance to be a 1.9 surplus. We do see, though, in the materials, supplies, and repairs category that this was notably the most affected, which is over budget by approximately 5.8 million. So you can see that is roughly just the same amount of the ice storm costs that were impacting the year-end results. Revenue patterns have also shifted. Building permit and bylaw revenues have increased. Planning activities softened, and recreation programs experienced a bit of disruption. These changes required updates to the 26 budget to align these expectations with the current conditions. So as we see, the major drivers for the 26 recalibration include inflation and rising OPP costs, new legislation requirements, and updated salary and benefit estimates. Technology and modernization, and as CAO Binns mentioned, the Simcoe Woods Community Center. And then in the last slide there, we see that the capital program remains fully funded. It has an $8.3 million carry forward into 2026, and this was mainly due to the storm-related delays and reduced staff capacity to advance other capital projects during the response and recovery period. So these remaining projects are then being carried forward into the 2026 capital program, and the reserves that were funding these projects have remained in reserves in 2025 to be drawn in 2026 when the projects are completed.
I'd like to just highlight a couple elements. One, the MISA application, the Municipal Ice Storm Recovery Funding. The township was one of 63 municipalities, probably one of the hardest hit. We were also the first municipality to have our application in to the program. So kudos to the team on that. And also the majority of the municipalities that received the preliminary funding received 20 or 30%, whereas we received 60%. So just to highlight that impact of even factoring in the additional 40%, we are anticipating being in a positive year-end position, favorable variance, and as Ms. Johnson alluded to, those surplus funds would be directed back to reserves. There was significant building activity, and all you needed to do is drive around the township to see all of the new construction in various areas. The revenue that is derived from building permits is restricted. It's one of those restricted reserve funds. So although we're anticipating a fairly significant favorable year-end position for 2025, a lot of that surplus is a result of the revenues in building that would be directed back to those restricted reserves. But we are anticipating a favorable position. A lot of questions around the winter. We've had two really significant winters that I think a lot of us, have forgotten about for a number of years. The operations team certainly has seen impacts to the budget with the number of responses. So we are in 2025, our winter operations budget would be higher than budgeted. But at the same time, the operations team efforts were directed to the ice storm. So there was a lot of planned maintenance work that didn't happen that will offset those costs. And we do maintain a winter maintenance reserve to be able to deal with the operating variances just with the ebb and flow based on the number of events. So I did want to highlight those elements.
Sorry. These slides explain how the tax dollars are, is this 50? Can you do that one then? Can you do that one? Sorry, apologize. Sorry, I apologize. Sorry. These slides provide a clear picture of the township's anticipated what the overview of the recalibration budget is, and you can see where the major consideration and focus is on in the budget that staff have reflected. We see like the Ontario provincial policing costs, that amount has been increased by an additional percentage in the budget. In 26's original budget, there was an estimate of the 5% increase at that time, and we know that was capped at 11% this year. So that original difference, or that amount in the difference, has now been put into the recalibration budget. We also look at what the impacts are with our asset management plan and reserve contributions. We've considered those factors, and also with our risk management and our insurance. All of these different factors have played a role in the recalibration process, and will be reflected in each of the department's operational summaries. Okay.
We wanted to also flag some of the external pressures. We've highlighted that in the 25 and 26 budget presentation. A lot of those pressures that were previously identified continue to exist. Things like inflation, construction costs, supply chain, tariffs, and certainly the big question mark now over what's happening with tariffs and how that will shape out over the next number of months. The pressures around shortages of skilled workers in a number of roles, and again, our strategic emphasis on being an employer of choice. Our reliance on volunteers. Ms. Johnson spoke about OPP costs. We'll speak about that in a little more detail. The other big trend that we'll go over in a little more detail is although we've seen an increase in building and planning activity, all of the uncertainty in the environment now is really causing a bit of a pause in building activity, and we're seeing and anticipating those trends both in the number of planning applications moving forward and residential development. Ongoing provincial policy changes. There's certainly been a significant number of policy shifts in the planning world alone, let alone all of the other elements that continue to work through in the municipality in a position to having to react, and often in a lot of cases increase the level of service based on changes in service delivery either at the provincial level. The other thing I think council's aware of that Mr. Flannery will have a report coming forward to council on in short order is some of the user fees. The city of Orillia and their request for contributions to recreation user fees, and also understand that there's been some discussion with the library fees with the city of Orillia, which was a challenge for the municipality a number of years ago. But those things continue to be pressures with all of our neighbors as they feel the same pressures as the township and look to increase their revenues to minimize their tax levy impacts. Climate change, we've spoken a lot about. The ice storm's a really good example of that. And certainly the trends around risk management and cyber and protection of information, and just changes in general with recycling that has just taken place, and the recent announcement from the province on changes to conservation authorities, for example. So some fairly significant structural changes. And that is likely going to continue with the provincial government looking at servicing, regional servicing, and some of those considerations that have been on the radar for some time. And I'll turn it back over to Ms. Johnson.
Okay. So these slides, where does your tax dollars go? They explain exactly where the recalibrated 2026 budget, where the focus is on. And as you can see, we have that diagram of the loonie, which then shows the breakdown of the township's operating budget and how much of an impact it has on a dollar of tax revenue. Tax revenue and expenses, and you can see the County of Simcoe, the school boards, and the capital reserves there. So as it shows, a 1% change in the township's tax levy does equal $305,000 this year. The blended 26 tax impact is presented today at 3.93% blended with the county and the school boards, or $40.19 per 100,000 of residential assessment. It does maintain a balance while updating revenues, reserve contributions, and internal allocations. The next slide will show where those tax dollars, the one next slide next, where those tax dollars do go in the functional areas of the township. You can see that roads operations and has the largest investment. And then with recreation and general government, OPP, policing services, and so on, you can see where our tax dollars are mainly focused in. And then we give some budget tidbits there so that it gives some context on what does it cost for on a $305,000 of 1% increase, what that impact has on our snow plowing and paving our roads, 1 kilometer of road that's paved. Slides 53 to 55, we show the outline of the management controls and financial contacts that support the 26 operating budget. We see that variance reviews, environmental scanning, and project stage gating all strengthen the township's ability to manage pressures. The assessment base remains heavily on residential, and we can see that in the graph that mainly the residential assessment is our main revenue source of tax dollars that we receive in the township. It's approximately 88 to 89% of the assessment base. And we just continue to maintain this full legislation compliance. And again, these are just graphs that show what the 2026 recalibrated operating budget consists of. And you can see that the operating expense for the recalibrated budget is $36.7 million. And that shows on the left side of the slide, and on the right side shows where the funding sources come from that do fund those operating expenses. And as I mentioned, the largest portion does come from the tax levy. But you can see the other sources would be, we have other items like grants, grant revenue, user fees, permits, revenues, and other sources of income there.
I'll just, I think these slides really kind of highlight what we were talking about in terms of some of the trends with building. You can see a significant spike from 2023 and kind of sustained through 2024 and 2025. And as we spoke about, we are predicting that to decline quite a bit in 2026. There's a lot of active development applications still happening through the township. Ms. Johnson spoke about the residential development. There's also been quite a bit of commercial development with the crane operators facility, Horman Doors, a number of commercial Oro Station here on line 7. And certainly an area of focus for 2026 is to continue to diversify the tax base, to try and bring new employment lands on stream. We currently have a number of lands that are held in indecision through the county's official plan, and we're working actively to bring those lands on stream. And certainly the team in corporate services and economic development do have regular outreach for interest in the township. A lot of the time we don't have lands or lands that are appropriately serviced. So again, as we look forward, future focus is to ensure readiness of those lands to be able to be investment ready when the time comes. The other fairly significant pieces from a foundational element that will really help strengthen our strategic planning, the next strategic plan of council is our growth management strategy, and really taking a longer term view on growth. Mr. Spagnol and the team in development services are working on this as we speak, and we'll be getting started on it very shortly, but really looking at a fulsome engagement process and where the township will grow, how the township will grow, the servicing requirements, and really a bigger picture, longer term view on development. Another fairly significant project with development services is zoning bylaw update. We did speak a little bit about a decline in planning activity. This is a project that will be led internally by Brent and his team to again provide some clarity and ensure that our zoning bylaws are reflective of the needs of the community and also best practice. There's been a lot that has changed over the years, and it's important that we bring the zoning bylaws up to best practice and conformity.
This slide, the next few slides, will give an overview of the recalibrated capital program, the 2026 recalibrated program. We can see that it totals $14 million. And again, we show on the left side the expenses in each of the functional areas, that being the most in roads and bridges and culverts. That's the blue bar. And then on the right side, it shows the funding sources for the capital program, which is mainly from capital reserves. And then we have development charges that, as stated, are in our development charges background study that show capital projects that are due to growth in the community and can be funded by development charges that are collected through the development that happens through building and planning. And then we show a portion of $1.9 million that is being funded by debt. That is primarily our drainage works program and bridges. That debt is part of the $6.5 million debenture that was approved by council in the 25-26 budget. And that $6.5 million will be sourced and funding the projects through 2029. So it was to fund projects from 2025 to 2029 for roads, bridges, and drainage. And then we see there's also grants that we receive from the from the provincial government. That would be our partnership funding, our community infrastructure funding, and our gas tax funding, which is primarily used for our roads network projects. And as we said, there was $8 million of this $14 million program that was 2025 projects that were carried over. And as we stated, it was due to a lot of the ice storm, the impact of the ice storm and the capacity to complete those projects in 2025. So those reserves have remained and will fund those projects in 2026 when they're completed. This slide here shows the breakdown of the capital levy that is part of the budget. It is approximately $8 million for 2026, and you can see that is broken into a portion of $2.1 million for past debt payments. Those are projects that have been done in the past, and we had debentures or loans that we had taken out for that, and now we're paying those debts over a period, and so we collect that funds on the capital levy to pay for that past debt, and the remaining funding of the capital levy does go in to replenish capital reserves for future replacement costs. This graph here shows an overview of the spending from 24 to 2029 of the capital program, where those areas of spending has happened for each of the functional areas. You can see that we have taken the berry boundary compensation and shown that as the orange on the bars that show the orange at the top. That reflects the berry boundary adjustment funding that we've taken and allocated over 5 years, 2026 to 2030. This graph only shows to 2029 to be in alignment with the capital program forecast. So that is approximately $2 million that has been added to reserves from 26 to 29 in this graph. And you can see the purple lines are where our reserve levels are at each year, and that is reflected in that additional, what do we put in for regular contributions on the capital levy, the berry boundary contributions, and as well as that 3% additional contribution that Township Council had approved last year. But for this year, we have backed out that 1%, and there is only a reflection of 2% going into capital reserves. Okay, next slide.
Before we leave this slide, I think the one piece I wanted to highlight here is Ms. Johnson spoke about the 2026 recalibrated capital program. We did remove $2.6 million in projects that were planned for 2026. And really, the objective was to look at the must-do capital projects. And when we're looking at our reserve balances, there has certainly been a trend over the years to be pulling more from reserves than what we're putting in. And we spoke about that at length in 25 and 26 in our asset management plan report. So the objective is to reduce capital spending. There's still a gap that exists, and we need to spend more. But until there's a long-term financial strategy, we want to curb the expenditures, look at our levels of service and what's required to maintain those levels of service from a longer-term perspective. We'll speak about that in a little more detail, but there were some planned road projects that were the right thing to do from a rehabilitation perspective. We've put those off. The assumption currently in the graph that you see here is that they've been deferred to 2027. So you'll see higher projects in 2027, but we will look at those critically again when we get into 2027 in terms of what are critical projects until we have that longer term financial plan and a new strategic plan to really help guide what's required from a long-term investment perspective.
And just to reiterate that and to add on to this, this graph, which pictures our asset management plan with the recommended service level spending in our capital projects should be each year. And we can see that it was recommended at $21.8 million in our 2024 asset management plan. We've inflated that by 3% each year for inflation. And again, as you see from this graph, the green color shaded area represents our regular capital reserve contributions from our capital levy. The blue area represents that additional funds that that council had strategically approved, the 3% last year in 2025 and now 2% for 2026. And then we've gone back to the 3% for future years in this graph. And then the orange represents the Barrie boundary funds that we've allocated over 5 years. And then you can still see the red hatched area represents our funding gap, that we still have that major funding gap to fund our asset management plan as is. So as CAO Benz alluded to, we do need to look at additional strategies to be looking at long-term financial plan and forecast to reduce that funding gap, and how we're going to do that in 26 and 27.
And I think this is kind of a scary graph to look at when you look at the funding gap. And I'll start off in saying that, the township of Oro-Medonte, this isn't an isolated issue here. It's, I think, the same profile for the majority of municipalities across the province, and including probably the province as well, and its requirements for infrastructure. And we can't close that gap in just looking at the revenue side of the equation. I think it really is a fulsome discussion about the levels of service and the sustainability of being able to provide those levels of service. And that's something that will require fulsome engagement with the community, and really a foundational element of a new long-term plan. It's maybe a good segue into the long-term financial plan, and really from a continuous improvement lens, we've spoke about where we've been in 25, some of the trends, what's looking at 2026 recalibration, and really kind of looking ahead at the financial sustainability and how we move that forward. I mentioned the growth management strategy. There's the long-term financial plan. There's an updated strategic plan. All of these things will come together as foundational elements and information to ground a new strategic plan with fulsome community engagement in the process. And that work, the long-term financial plan, is anticipated to start in 2026, carry through to 27, and align with those other processes that, if you recall back to the 25 and 26 budget presentation and the elements of what goes into a strategic plan, this is really the information that really provides a longer term view, and will certainly provide some policy recommendations for investments and some policy considerations for council from a longer term perspective related to the township's financial position.
Slides 66 through 69 provide an overview of the township's debt position and investment strategy. This slide actually comes from the province in municipal affairs and housing. It provides the township each year, once we've completed our financial information return, it provides a template or a report that says what the township's annual debt repayment limit is. And you can see that the township is in a good position, even with the debt that we do carry. We do have capacity to obtain more debt if that would be where we need to do. But this is actually what they give and show, and they give you the interest rates and how many years that some loans can be funded by. So the next slide will be showing just what debentures we do hold within the township and what that debt is. So approximately 16.74 million is outstanding at the end of December 31st, 2025. And we show the debenture ID and the maturities that these debentures will be matured at, and you can see the years to that maturity. So the most recent one was the bridges and culverts, drainage and roads that was just received in 2025. And as I mentioned before, that's for the capital works that will be done through 2025 to 2029 for roads, bridges, and drainage.
Thing to point out here too is that each of these debentures would have its own interest rate and term. When we're considering, and we spoke about this with the debenture for 2025 to the 2029 projects, when we're considering debenture, we'll look at that interest rate. We'll look at what's required for liquidity in our reserves and reserve balances. And then look at how we balance or strategically utilize debt to be able to fund some of those projects and smooth the impact over a number of years.
And again, this is just another slide just giving an overview of the debentures and what type of capital works that the debentures that we have received over the last few years are funding. And these debenture, the payments for debentures, as I mentioned earlier, they are they're funded or recovered by the capital tax levy. And this year it's $2.1 million. That reflects both principal and interest. And again, it's just mainly for our capital projects that we will be funding over the 25 to 29 years. This slide just gives an overview of the township's investments that were held with RBC Dominion Securities and the One Investment Group, which is Ontario Municipalities Investment Pool. We have a high interest savings account, and as you can see, I've shown a diagram of both the RBC and the One Investment accounts as of the end of 2025, and the township does have those funds in those investments. And we do this as well, just in order to, as we see, why we do this is that we're receiving more interest and investment income on our reserves, keeping them in those reserves and receiving that investment income while trying to smooth the cost of the capital program expenses without having to withdraw from our reserve balances and just receive more interest. And so that's a better rate where to go, is able to earn more investment income.
And just to that point, it is shifting a little bit with higher interest rates and lower returns on investments. So that is flagged here too, just in terms of the current rates of return and the current debenture rates. And if we look back at some of our historic debentures, Shannon may have rates like under 2% for some of our projects, and that's certainly not the environment today. So in terms of drivers and some of the assumptions and the recalibration, certainly the Ontario Provincial Police budget at nearly what should be close to a $4 million budget. There was a cap last year, council will recall, of 5%. There's an 11% cap this year. We assumed another 5% increase in the planned budget. That additional 6% equates to about $170,000. The calculated cost of 2026 policing is, as I said, just under $4 million. It's $3.8 million. We're being billed just under 3.3. So the difference is 524,000 that will likely be passed along to the municipality at some point in time. So just want to flag that it was you'll recall the OPP billing model is based on a number of elements, many of which are based on a 3-year historic average. The lion's share of this has to do with salaries and benefits that are compounding at the OPP level. So there is a compounding effect of, although it's capped, it does push that amount higher moving forward. So just to put that into context, if there wasn't a cap in 2027, 524,000 plus the compounding effect will be nearing close to a 2% increase alone for OPP costs. And that's a significant cost driver. We do have an OPP or policing reserve fund to be able to smooth. We didn't include any smoothing in the budget because that would only compound a problem that we would need to fund. And as you can see, this is a pretty big problem. So getting back to the community center, and another reason why we took some of the smoothing out is to be able to allow us more room to be able to absorb or to address some of these costs that we know will be coming down to the municipality at some point in time. So I think this will be an area of continued advocacy. Mayor Greenlaw, we've met with the Solicitor General on this, and we'll continue to do that with our municipal counterparts because it is a big impact. We've also summarized the presentations that council received from our environmental associations, and you can see that in the following slides. Our conservation authorities and the different categories of service. And I did want to flag that the 2026 draft budget recalibration doesn't include the $17,663 for the Category 3 NVCA programs consistent with Council's previous direction. Certainly lots of questions around what this means for the provincial direction and budgets with the consolidation of conservation authorities, and not much more we can say at that point, save and except more to come. But I think the objective is some efficiencies, streamlined efficiencies both in service delivery and the cost to provide those services.
This slide here gives us an overview of the 2026 recalibrated operating budget. You can see how we've given the final position of the amended budget and what those amendments have been. There's been an increase of $379,000 to the 2026 operating budget that was added to the original budget. So we can see where those drivers have been reflected. Those have been in the staffing, OPP costs, as CAO Bins mentioned, winter maintenance pressures. We've had some reduced planning and recreation revenues, and we have that full year operations at the Simcoe Woods Community Center. So incorporating all of these main drivers, that is what's been reflected in this amended budget. And the next slides do show how all of these main drivers have flown through to each operational department. That reflects in their service requirements and their operational realities. It also explains how the different categories of the internal revenues and internal expenses are shown. Those are internal costs, as mentioned, for the facilities, fleet, and IT divisions, and just a simple cost recovery, full 100% cost recovery for those areas. So with the new GL restructure and department restructuring, those are some different alignments or realignments that you'll see in this new 2026 amended budget.
If I could maybe just tease out a couple elements here, on the salary and benefit front in 2025, we really looked at, for the 25 budget, looking at the timing of positions, what leaves and vacancies were there to reflect or better reflect the actual planned costs for salaries and benefits. The previous 2026 planned budget had all of the staffing all in based on that point in the plan. We've recalibrated the plan to, again, reflect the timing of those positions, any leaves that are there, to better reflect the actual costing that would be incurred from staffing. I do want to highlight some of the significant elements from a salary and benefit perspective. Being a service-based business, the largest portion of our budget is our human resources. We are seeing a pressure with a 12% increase in our health benefit premiums. The salary and benefit adjustments do reflect Council's pay principles and compensation policy. And as highlighted in a previous slide, we are in negotiations with our bargaining unit at this time, and we continue to work through that process. There's three new positions that are proposed as part of the budget. There's a development engineering technologist that would be user pay, so that is insourcing development engineering to work with development services and plans review, and some of the field review of engineering that would be paid for through development, and that position is phased in 26. There's also a health and safety position for our people and culture team to enhance the focus on occupational health and safety, looking at starting a work well audit and really building out our health and safety program. And you've seen some of the trends on recruitment and retention, and that's really been a shift in the responsibilities of the people and culture team. So that position is phased in as well. And then there's some additional part-time staff for the new community center, looking at expanding the customer service that we provide in a central location in the township, so that residents don't need to, if they need to come into the office, don't need to come down to the office here in what was old Oro to be able to access those services. The other thing that we've done to offset those costs is, I mentioned in development services with insourcing some projects, which creates some interesting opportunities for staff, but it's better utilizing some of that capacity. We've also looked at how we can better distribute overhead costs to the respective departments. So while costs have gone up, you won't necessarily see that on the salary and benefit line item, because some of that is offset with distribution to user pay departments. So a good example would be the building department, which is legislated to be fully cost recovered. When we factor in IT costs, some of the finance costs to building, those salaries get distributed and paid for through those user fees. So there's those elements that are built into the recalibration as well. And then all of those pressures, which I think these are really a summary, if we were to provide an overview of what's driving the difference in the recalibration versus the previously planned budget, this is it. It's really the OPP costs, it's the decrease in planned revenue in planning and recreation, the new community center and that reduction, cutting that in half, salaries and benefits, and to be able to absorb all of those costs, we had to, the planned 3% increase to decrease that to 2%. So the 1% is equivalent to 305,000. And again, in recognition of the revenues that unplanned revenues that are coming from the city of Barrie compensation, there will be a motion before council to consider reducing that further down to just under 1%. These next slides, I don't think we'll go into a level of detail. It is provided for council, should council have any specific questions. As I said, I think looking at the variances, you'll see those corporate variances that we just spoke about transcend into each of the operating areas. And then a lot of the ins and the outs that you're seeing as a result of the new GL structure with how costs are being distributed. So there really isn't anything, I think, material. I would really classify this as a standard base budget with no significant adjustments to really flag for council's consideration. Outside of those additional staffing elements that I had flagged earlier. The other piece is our grants and subsidies. The other two external organizations, Ontario's Lake Country and the Chamber of Commerce, base funding is reflected in the corporate services budget, and you won't see that in these grants and subsidies because it's a service level provision. The assumption of the grants and subsidies previous to following budget years is we've maintained the same budget allocation, and as you can see from the table here, the asks are always more than the budget allocation. But I think that the key point for council would be these are the assumptions that are in the budget now. If council wanted to increase funding to these organizations, it would require either cutting funding to another organization or increasing the budget to be able to fund it. So at this point, the assumption is that it's the same budget allocation, and if there was a desire to do anything different, it would require an amendment of council. The way we would see this rolling out, Mayor Greenlaw, is similar to previous years. Council would approve the budget allocation, and then we would come back with the table just to for council to allocate that out across our organizations. Do you want to do anything on the capital summary?
Yeah, I'll just join them. And thank you. This is the last part of the presentation is the 2026 capital program that's been amended. And as you can see, we show the functional areas, the departments or divisions, and what was first approved in the 2026 capital budget. And then we show the adjustments made for those that were 2025 carryover projects and those that we've deferred the work. As we mentioned earlier, we did defer 16 projects that were removed that equated to $2.6 million. So we did reduce that, and we have added 26 new projects into the other column, and you will see justification sheets that are in the following slides that we've included to show what projects those are in those divisions. And any of the previous capital projects and justification sheets can be found in the original 2025-26 capital budget presentation, which we've included a link there so that you can easily go and see and review what projects those are in detail. But the following slides do give the individual projects in each division of that area.
And I think maybe just the point I would add here is that there's still each project has its critical path and project plan. And an example may be the Warminster Side Road project, that there's some land acquisition that needs to happen for that project to advance. We'll continue to update council either through staff reports on respective projects or through the variance report, the status of those projects. So at this point, we have looked at things through the lens of doability, but as Ms. Johnson highlighted, with some of the challenges in 25, I'm going to touch wood on this one, not anticipating some of the things that we had to deal with last year. But if we do, those projects will be stage gated, and we'll continue to move along, and we'll keep council apprised as we go. Mayor Greenlaw, members of council, that's a high-level overview. There's additional context both in last year's presentation as well as this year's presentation. And the team here is happy to answer any questions or go into more detail on any areas that council may wish to drill down on. Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw.
Thank you very much, CEO Benz and Shannon. A lot of information there, very detailed but concise, and I appreciate you, giving the high-level overview. And council has been through the budget, and it's many pages and many charts and graphs. But I'll open the floor at this time for council members for questions in regards to any of the information that's been presented.
Me?
Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
Oh, I thank you very much. I just, first of all, opening up with regard to this presentation of the budget, I guess what I'd like to say is thank you very much, first and foremost, to staff and to my council colleagues. I think that the Finance Department has certainly been through a journey to get to this point where it can present a budget based on accurate ledgers, first and foremost, as there was a decline in the ability of the department to do that over the last few years. And I'm very happy to see that the staff has presented some fairly nimble alternatives looking in the sort of forward-looking alternatives in balancing out some of the capital planning issues. I was concerned that with the deferment of some of the 2025 projects into 2026, that we'd end up with kind of a double cohort of capital projects that, certainly we would have the funds for, but we might not have the contractors for, or that we might end up paying a lot more for than we would have otherwise planned, because the bidding wouldn't have been as competitive with as much work on the table. And hopefully, I think we've selected the right ones to move forward with. This is always sometimes a guess, and some people will be happy and some people will be sad. I did want to dwell a little bit on slide, what I think is 64, which is the one that shows the funding gap. So if we could just call that one up for a moment. And I think Councillor Hutchison may want to comment on this funding gap slide as well. But I think what's important to stress here is that we appear to be chasing a carrot tied to a stick. We're not going to catch up to that funding gap unless we modify our levels of service. So I'm very pleased to see that we have projects in mind to do that. We can all, with the best of intents, believe that we can get to close that funding gap, but we won't do it without a plan. And you don't plan for what you can't measure. So thankfully, we've been able to measure once again, and we can see what our future does look like. And I think I'll pass it over to Councillor Hutchison in a moment or two, I think. But, we would also like to see what the past looked like in order to understand the full breadth of how we got to where we are. So, a project that is a larger look forward into where we want to be with our service levels is very important. And I'll pass the floor over to anyone else who wants to speak at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchison, do you want to pick up from there?
Sure. Sorry. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lavoie. Yes, thank you. I had asked staff and I previously, so I will speak to slide 62 and 64 that are discussing this funding gap. If we can go there to 6, thank you. And I see that the graph starts in 2024 and it shows our reserves at a little bit over $20 million. And of course our gap. What I'd like to see, because we talk about looking in the rearview mirror, and I think in order for our community to understand, although we've articulated this a number of times, the gap in the funding and in the reserves, I'd like to be able to see us project back to about 2019, because this isn't a result of something that just happened over the last term of this council. This has been a historical, and I think as CAO Ben said, there was a trend over the years of pulling more from reserves and putting into reserves, and this isn't something that's just new to this term of council. I think we need to be able to demonstrate to our community, why we have had to make some of the decisions in the last couple of years with regards to the tax levy and how we've gotten here and what the historical context is, so that people really have an understanding that if we don't get on top of this trend, we're just going to be swimming further and further underwater. And I think that's very important for people to understand in a very digestible manner. So I'm hoping that when we come back to this at our next meeting, we can have sort of that demonstration of where we were about 2019 would be fantastic. Just a couple of other notes. I'm glad that you took time to sort of talk about the benefit of using debt from time to time versus pulling from reserves. I mean, it all goes into this strategy, and it totally makes sense if you're getting a greater rate of return on your investments versus what you're paying on your debt. It's a pretty simple equation that you're going to take advantage of that. So my next question would be this: I know we would have an investment policy at the municipal level as to what types of investments we could be participating in with our investment advisor group. And it looks to me, I haven't reviewed that policy, but I would say it probably sticks to GICs and high interest accounts. Is there some appetite to have a look at being a little bit more creative in looking at perhaps AAA bond placements or, low risk? I know that I'm assuming that we have to stay within a certain sort of required risk framework, but is there something we could be looking at to get a little bit more creative to see if we could take advantage of some interest rates on those investments?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hutchison. Yes, you're correct. The Municipal Act clearly states that a municipality must stay within a certain investment risk, which would be GICs, bonds, but it also has another paragraph in it that states that a municipality can have its council, if the council approves it, to be a prudent investor, but that needs to be done through a bylaw that I was, CAO and Bins and I have been speaking about to bring forth the council, especially with this funds that we're going to be receiving through the Barrie boundary adjustment, that it would be a bylaw that I would bring forth to request council to approve the township to be a prudent investor through the one investment, the municipal pool in investments, and therefore then we would be able to invest in higher risk, like you mentioned, those types of investments that would earn more interest not just the basic AA bonds or at that level.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, and CO Binge, you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Green. I just, on the first comment or question, request rather, to come back with some historic information, certainly we can do that for council on the 11th. I think the other thing that I really wanted to flag is it's not just the amount going in, and we spoke about the amount coming out. And we were just talking about this earlier today. Like the price of a pickup truck that we used to budget for 5 years ago was $30,000. That same pickup truck now is close to $75,000. So when you look at the township's assets, the replacement cycle, we're seeing that pressure on both sides, that we haven't been putting that in to keep up to this unprecedented level of inflation. That really there's pressures on both sides, and we have a lot of infrastructure renewal, and so there has been more money coming out to deal with that. I mean, that gap that you see in that image includes a 3% assumption, which is kind of the trend for building construction indexes over the last number of years. It doesn't reflect the jump that we've seen over the past number of years, but we'll certainly try to paint that historic picture to better understand kind of what's happened historically.
And I just to add a comment to that, I think how we've arrived at where we are when we took this this council was seated, likely far exceeded prior even to 1999, or sorry, 2009, not 19. Yeah, I know I'm time warp. So, but I think the as long as we can collect that fairly efficiently to have an understanding, it corrects us from making the same mistakes again. But I think the bigger issue that we need to spend the time on is providing the solution moving forward and how we get ourselves out of where we are to a much better place that is sustainable for this municipality moving forward. So, but I think that all the comments have been very, very positive and constructive, even though we find ourselves with challenges. But then, if there were no challenges, we wouldn't need to be here. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to my colleagues. I think it's important to draw the comparison of there is a funding gap that exists, but at the same time we have capacity to take on debt in the event that we were need to. In the event that we didn't have a funding gap, that could potentially be argued by some in the community that we'd actually been either appropriately or overtaxed in the past. So a funding gap exists, but we have the appropriate debt facilities available to us in the event, in the short term, we needed to take on debt to continue the level of service that's available. But that funding gap that exists in some ways should be noted to the taxpayer that means that you're not being overtaxed. I think that's an important distinction to just kind of clarify for everyone out there.
So I love it how the glass is half empty or it's half full, right? Just what? Any other questions at this time? Councillor Schell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to staff and everybody else. I apologize for arriving late. I was in the midst of stopping a flood from a frozen, broken water main, and when council's finished tonight, I have to go back and fix it. So I'm pleased to see the formatting of the budget making much easier to review, and I'm also pleased to see the allocation of $25,000 for generators to the 2 community halls, and hope to see that maybe we can extend that to all the other community halls in the future. Okay, I'm also pleased to see the grant coming from the province to mainly cover the cost of the ice storm that otherwise would have dramatically increased the budget. So a couple of questions, if I may. Can you define the deferring of projects? I'm going to say, i.e. bridges and roads, et cetera? Like, do they have a life expectancy? Like, is there any way we can look at maybe deferring some of them further on, later on? Or are we just going to do them because we got the money or we plan for it? I mean, how does that plan work?
CEO Binns?
Thank you, Mayor Green. Good question, Councillor Shell. The 25-26 budget presentation, you'll probably recall some of the charts that we had where we had a bridge condition index and a pavement condition index. So on the bridge side, we're required to have a biannual engineering assessment that looks at the deficiencies and anything that needs to be addressed in the immediate time frame. There's also maintenance work that you complete the maintenance, your asset is going to last longer. So those are the things that drive the bridge program. The same thing is really on the road side, that we try and maintain higher volume roads at a better condition. But this is a level of service discussion, getting back to the asset management plan gap that, for example, in 2019, we did a road network plan that looked at what it would cost to maintain our current hard surfaced roads. And in 2019, the gap to the capital program was, I think, around $10 million a year at that point in time. And where I'm heading is that it's a little bit of both. We're not doing what we should be doing, because we've got a gap and we do the best we can with what we can afford to do. But that also costs more in the long run, because if you're only dealing with the emerging or the immediate priorities, then you're not dealing with some of the maintenance stuff that will keep an asset alive longer. So it's a little bit of both. We're trying to really use what we have available to optimize the return of that investment. And it's really been, it's not a worst first, because we do have some bad roads that are low volume roads. And that's sometimes a challenge to explain that, this road is worse than another road, but another road could have 10 times the traffic volume and would be given priority, with the lens of safety and everything else. So it's a bit dynamic, but it is informed by technical engineering studies with a prioritized lens from staff on what we can do with the dollars that we have.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions this time? No? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to comment on it, and one or two questions have already been asked here, but it's quite comprehensive and clear to anybody listening, in particular, and reading it, and it clearly spells out where tax money that we all pay is going, and I'm certainly confident in the money that's the revenue is being well taken care of by finance here, and like I said, I'm not only a member of council here, but I'm a taxpayer as well, and I have full confidence in our township here and you guys that it's been well taken care of. So I think anybody watching today can see that as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other? Deputy Mayor Lavoie?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A couple more comments, in fact. I just wanted to point out that whether or not our staff uses these indices, but from 2015 to 24, the municipal service cost growth was 30%, whereas the CPI inflation rate was 22%. So, I think as taxpayers in a municipal environment, we have to accept the fact that the cost of municipal servicing is growing faster than perhaps our salaries or the rate of inflation as we know it in a common good, a basket of goods. Not to say, and I want to go back to the point I made earlier, that I think staff is doing a great job in trying to find some efficiencies to reduce that gap between the two. I also wanted to make a point about the reserve fund investment returns and emphasizing that I believe that those fund returns should go back into the reserves. And I want to point out that there may have been a practice for some time for councils to reduce the tax levy by diverting the reserve fund returns into the operating budget. We're not doing that. And I want to stress that that's the case here and that practice has ceased. The other thing that I'd like to bring forward is that, you know, we're on the verge of once again commencing quarterly reporting from our finance department, which is something we haven't had in a number of years, and we'll bring that forward at the next meeting so that the residents can understand that there is now responsible governance in the financial area. So those are my final comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Lavoie. CAO Benz?
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a point that the deputy made around investment income, that the past practice has been that investment income has formed part of the revenue on the operating side. So we lose that ability to grow reserves and keep up with inflation, because really what we're earning in interest should keep up with inflation or even surpass that. So what is in the budget this year is what was in the budget assumption previously was 200,000 from investment income is still in the base. We haven't been able to pull that out this year without having to absorb that in the levy. So those things, as I mentioned, that we've done, certainly moving forward, we'll look to discontinue that practice, and that's a matter of policy consideration for council as well, to have a policy that guides that, so that practice is consistent and would require council direction to change that policy. So I just wanted to flag that there's 200,000 from investment income. Shannon, I think for 25, we're kind of between around 3.5% or so. I don't know what that equates to, but certainly more than the 200K. So we haven't moved the incremental adjustment into the operating budget, but that 200,000 that's been there for quite some time is still there, and we'll look to discontinue that in 2027.
No, thank you for that clarity. And I think the important thing is you can't turn the ship around on a dime, and we're making the steps to get things corrected as efficiently and quickly as possible without upsetting the apple cart. So, Councillor Hutchison.
I'm just processing this, and I just want to be clear. So we have this funding gap, and it's really a result of a number of things. One being not enough funds were being put in to stay abreast of the rate of inflation, but funds that were being put in and invested, the investment returns were not remaining within the reserve. They were being pulled out to assist the operation of operations. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shannon, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hutchison. That's correct. So in the corporate non-departmental revenue department, it's one of the slides after the operating budget, you will see that department is a source of revenues that are non-departmental. So that's investment income, that's bank interest income, that's supplementary taxes. So the practice has been in previous years that all that investment income or bank interest income would stay in the corporate non-departmental operating budget, which would then absorb expenses that are in the other operating divisions. It has never been allocated to the reserves in the past. It has stayed in the operating budget to absorb expenses and keep the levy low.
Thank you. And CAO Benz?
I think this is a really good discussion, and I think I mean, this is a challenge across the sector, and what I wanted to highlight is really the focus on tax rate, right? And I think that's really kind of the root of the focus is the focus on a tax rate as opposed to the broad considerations of the value, the cost benefit, the future focus, and it's not a simple comparative analysis that you can say, you know, that Springwater Township had a tax increase of X or Tiny Township had a tax increase of Y, and how does that compare to Oro-Medonte? Because there are a number of factors that play into it. There's the actual assessment of the properties. There's the cost of providing service. There's all of those elements. And although there's things like municipal performance measures that try and create a bit of a benchmarking exercise, it's apples and oranges, even in terms of how cost is proportioned out across those respective areas. So I just wanted to highlight that, I think, for council and for the public, that, you know, we tend to focus on the tax rate element without the consideration of the impact of that percentage on per a dollar per assessment, and when we factor in all of those other elements, that's what's really required to provide a kind of a fulsome comparative analysis. But that information isn't readily available, and there really isn't anything to reconcile that. So to your point, Councillor Hutchison, I wanted to just flag that, because that's the other part is, and the same thing happens in the private sector with a focus on shareholder returns and those elements at the sake of the longer term view, but it's certainly prevalent in the municipal sector.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just curious, the assessment, you mentioned the assessment on properties. Impact comes in and does their own assessment. So when does that affect the tax revenue, the levy, or at least the money coming into the township? When does that affect it? How does it affect it? And when?
Well, the tax levy percentages get applied to the assessment. So we know the assessment growth, if you look at, you know, the market value, or, you know, what houses are selling for in your neighborhood, it's nowhere near what the MPAC assessment is. We're still using 2016 assessment from MPAC. And although that increases, there hasn't been a reassessment since 2016. So I guess how I would frame it, Councillor Young, is that the tax rate is the revenue that's generated is based off of the assessment base. So that comes directly from MPAC. As we have new building come online, then that's new assessment. But at the same time, that's also new cost to the municipality, because now we have to service that new development. From a comparative perspective, we have more residential, for example. So the burden on the residential levy would be higher in Oro-Medonte than it would be in the city of Orillia that has more employment, for example. So there's those elements, and the total assessment, so the value of the homes. You know, we have a shoreline community. Shoreline communities tend to have higher assessment given the value of those properties. That may differ from the town of Midland. Well, I guess Midland has some shoreline as well, maybe not the best example, but a municipality that doesn't have shoreline, for example, would have likely a lower assessment based on the number of properties.
Yeah, the gap's more between new homes that are being built and what they're being assessed at versus something that was built years before MPAC stopped making their adjustments. So that's where the gap really lies, because we budget on this is how much money we need as a municipality to move forward, and it's based off the impact, right? So no, thank you. Councillor Schell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to Mr. Binns. Hypothetically, if we were to raise the taxes by only half of what we're asking for, what would be the implications to our operations? Like negative, positive, either way?
Good question, Councillor Shell. So I think the best way to sum that up is to what Mayor Greenlaw had just said, is that we look at the cost to provide those services, and then that determines what we need to collect from the levy, minus any external funding and those other revenue sources to pay for that. So, if we cut our revenue, tax revenue in half, we would have to cut the services in half to be able to balance the budget. We have to have a balanced budget. So both sides of the equation would need to balance.
Supplemental. So would that mean looking at another recalibration if one were to go that way?
It would be more than a recalibration. I mean, it would be a significant shift in delivery of service that staff would have to look at if that was an objective to reduce the levy by whatever it is. I think the capital side, we've introduced the money coming from the city of Barrie. Like, that would be the first thing I would flag, is that we've got some funds that we hadn't planned for that give us a little bit more room on the capital levy side. We've reduced 1% already. Council is considering taking that down even further. So that would be the first place to start. Outside of that, it would be then looking at the services that we provide. And we've highlighted previously, we have legislated services that we have to provide. They have to be provided to a certain level. And then we have discretionary services. So we start with the discretionary services, and those have implications. There would be impacts of those decisions, and we would have to bring that forward and say, here's considerations, and here's the impact of those considerations.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
Okay, no, thank you. I think what we're looking at is, we want to see if we can take a small part out of the compensation money that came from Barrie to help alleviate the tax levy increase by decreasing it to a blended 3.3 in order to give some relief because of the economic environment our residents are facing, but at the same time not losing focus of the primary long-term plan, and that is to ensure that we build up reserves in order to make us sustainable moving forward. So it's a balancing act, and it's a recommendation that council can consider, when the motion comes to the floor at the conclusion of this item on the agenda. So that said, is there any other questions from members of council? Just a couple of quick closing comments I want to make before we deal with the motions. I thank you for all the hard work and the amazing job you did in putting this budget presentation together. I think the key points we have to look at is the foundational changes that you've taken in order to make us a sustainable and prosperous municipality moving forward as we evolve, because we are evolving from a small rural municipality into a mid-sized municipality. I think it's important that the reserves are addressed now. It's multi-pronged reason. Ensuring sustainability, but also to prepare for the unforeseen costs, because the province was very clear with us and the rest of the province of, as climate change evolves, these once a decade or once a century storms are becoming more frequent. and the cleanup and stuff on, you know, the province is an abyss for us to go back and try and grab money from, because you see on the other side what happens is we get downloaded costs. So it's we have to be respectful of each other that way, and by building up reserves, it will help us to absorb some of that if necessary, hopefully not in the future. And then the last point is, I want to ensure the staff and public that we will continue to provide all relevant information requested in order to see that we get the $13 million that still remains to be allocated to us by the province. And I'm very positive that they will expedite this as quickly as possible. The Barrie annexation money, I believe, should come before the end of the first quarter. The ice storm money will likely not come until the second or third quarter, because the province has yet to pass their 2026 budget, and they don't reseat until the 28th of March. So be patient, but at the same time, we need to be diligent. So that's basically everything. So, Madam Clerk, there's 3 motions to be tabled. And do you want first to receive the presentation, or I'll leave that in your hands, okay?
Moved by Young, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that the presentation provided by Sean Binns, Chief Administrative Officer and Senior Management Team, Re 2026 Mayor's Budget Recalibration.
Who's heard the motion? All in favor? That is carried. And may we have the second motion, please?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by LeBlanc. Be it resolved that council consider the mayor's proposed reduction of $352,653 to the capital levy contribution not reflected in the current draft 2026. My apologies, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to have to go through the first again.
Because your
For
mic
the
wasn't on?
public at home, because I
Okay.
was muted.
I could hear you, though.
So I know that council has called the vote on the first.
Did you want to
but
go
if-
back to the first motion then?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Moved by Young, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that the presentation provided by Sean Binns, Chief Administrative Officer and Senior Management Team, Re 2026 Mayor's Budget Recalibration be received.
I'm going to anticipate everyone's going to go agree with this, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next, please.
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that council consider the mayor's proposed reduction of $352,653 to the capital levy contribution not reflected in the current draft 2026 budget, which will result in an overall 2026 recalibrated blended tax increase of 3.30%.
Okay, Councillor Young has a question.
Yeah, thank you. You indicated consider, or is it approved if we vote that way?
That's what will come back at the next meeting.
Did council approve? Yeah.
Approve.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Good catch, Councillor Young. So we're going to change that friendly amendment to that council approve the mayor's proposed reduction.
Okay.
Okay?
Perfect. Okay. Any questions regarding the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And the third motion, please.
Moved by Clark and seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that council reduced a time period as set out in subsection 7.3 of OREG 530/22 to make an amendment to the proposed budget from 30 days to 12 days, which will be the February 4th, 2026. And that any amendments to the 2026 Mayor's Budget Recalibration received by end of day February 4th, 2026 be brought forward for Council's consideration at the February 11th, 2026 meeting.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Madam Clerk, thank you very much, and thank you very much for a great presentation, Ms. Johnson and Mr. Binns. 11B, this item is a, sorry. Okay. The next item is a placeholder to notify everyone that this item is to be brought forward at the February 11th, 2020 council meeting. So there will be no motion. That's Curtis Shelswell, Manager of Municipal Affairs, regarding permit parking fees. There are no reports of municipal officers for information. Reports and announcements as of council. Are there any updates from members of council as township representatives or partners and agencies? Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to make a couple of points about yesterday's county council meeting. Thank you. And I think first and foremost, one of the more interesting aspects was the report on the paramedic services. They've, for the previous year, undertaken a new color coding plan for response, which has resulted in lowered response times, higher compliance within the percentile slots that they're supposed to be in, and reduced overtime. In addition to that, there's also been higher rates of response for the correct emergency response team to arrive at the site first. So when fire should get there, because it's a fire, it's not the paramedics arriving first, because they're all dispatched simultaneously or notified simultaneously. So, and the relationship between the emergency services is reported to have improved. So I think that's all very good, because it's pointing in the direction that we all want to hear, which is that we're getting paramedics to our door sooner when we really need them. There's also some very interesting report on community services, formerly known as Ontario Works. I think they've taken certainly a more social science objective and planning perspective to providing services to those who are in need, and they're getting them more effectively off the street and housed. And I don't want to be a bleeding heart liberal here, but I do want to say that it's more expensive to leave people on the street and pay for them in our emergency wards in our hospitals than it is to find places for them to be safely overnight, or ultimately lift them off the street and get them back into society as ratepayers and homeowners. So those are a couple of good reports. There was, I think I'll stop there, but I think the mayor and I will probably update on the Roma conference as well. So I'll open the floor for the moment.
Any other? No.
I guess I'm back. Thank you. There was the TAPMO, Top Aggregate Producing Municipalities of Ontario annual general meeting. There was quite a bit of interest out of Caledon, and there was also interest from the big city mayors, because some of the big cities have aggregate operations, and I think they've realized it. So they've suddenly begun to realize that they have a problem. And they have the same problem we have, which of course is I notice in our budget that the royalties for haulage have gone up. That's the good news. The bad news is that the royalties for haulage have gone up because they don't account for the amount of damage that's done to our roads. So that was one of the key speaking points with regard to going back to the province in particular to increase that royalty that we can charge, because it's mandated. We don't set it. So that's very important, and it's very important. I think it's a good turning point for the top aggregate producing municipalities of Ontario to suddenly be in the spotlight where we are beginning to integrate with larger municipalities who carry more weight, quite frankly, politically, and who will be able to assist. It's key to recognize that Simcoe County exports the most aggregate of any Tier 1 municipality in the province, and not by a small measure, by quite a lot. And we're going to see more housing, more highways, and we're close to those resources or those projects that need those aggregates. So there's a lot getting hauled out, and we are seeing the impacts to our roads and the concerns from our residents about the haulage. And I'll let the mayor speak to our delegations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, and I guess to continue on with the deputy's comments is the amount of compensation the municipalities get individually for the amount of which is a non-renewable source that once it's gone is minimal. And unfortunately, I know it went to the OLT a number of years ago where the municipalities were successful, but the province stepped in and reversed that decision. So that's unfortunate. You know, sometimes even when we're right, we're wrong. So but anyways, the other thing is we did meet the parliamentary assistant of the MTO as well, and I have to say Carla Musso Garcia, practice that name, I couldn't say it at the meeting, but anyways, Carla did an amazing job, and Carla is a true role model, being the first female president of AORS. But the parliamentary assistants and the ministers that did meet her were blown away by just how knowledgeable and the stats that she brought forward in the presentations and the relevancy. And I know even Minister Thompson was also was really impressed with the professionalism that our staff exuberated during the delegation. So I think if anything else, we didn't walk out with everything, a bag of money like a lot of people do, but we walked out with putting a very positive impression on the ministers and parliamentary assistants that we did of delegations with, and we've opened the dialogue that will hopefully put us in a better spot moving forward in the very near future. And would you like to continue on?
Thank you very much. I'd like to pick up on a couple of your points there, Mr. Mayor. Just to go back to the meeting with Minister Lisa Thompson, Rural Affairs, she was very, as the mayor points out, very impressed with Carla Musso Garcia. And it's very important to realize that, there's been this trend backwards, perhaps, as characterized by some municipalities who do have, photographic radar speed enforcement and ticketing. And the province has, said they're going to come up with a great big fund to replace those initiatives. However, the vast majority, as was pointed out to the minister, of the fatalities occur on rural roads, not on urban roads. So this is very important to realize, and we need help, and our residents have pointed out to us that in times they're not satisfied with the speed controls or the options for speed controls, because our only option is the police. And you all understand, just from having gone through the budget discussions, how expensive the police are. And practically speaking, there's not many places for the police to hide on our roads because we don't have shoulders in a lot of cases. And we have roads that were pointed out by our staff to the minister that are not engineered roads. They were simply country roads that we paved over. So they don't have adequate shoulders. They wouldn't meet proper engineering standards today, and they would not be built the way they're built as they currently exist. So that's important for us to recognize. It's important to us to find ways to provide safety in our community, and we're hoping to do that. And I think our staff made that point quite well with the minister.
No, and I think the stat that everyone is kind of gobsmacked by was something like 12% of the accidents are on rural roads, but 52% of the deaths from accidents are on rural roads, and the cost to the entire system is something, was it $8 million per fatality it cost between healthcare, emergency services, and all that. When it's and that number is staggering when you stop and think about it, and how high the percentage is on rural roads versus in urban centers. So, like I said, very informative, and I think it's opened the door to a lot of great dialogue moving forward that will benefit our township. Any other comments or reports from members of council? Seeing none. Okay, the consent agenda. Is there anything from the consent agenda anybody wants pulled? Seeing none. The only thing I would recommend everyone to read Minister Flack's 14A, his letter, and we will put the letter. We received another letter from Minister Flack's office recently, and that we will put on the next meeting's agenda as well. Okay, so Madam Clerk, we have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Moved by Clark, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that the staff recommendations with respect to the items listed under consent agenda correspondence be adopted as printed.
All in favor? That is carried. We have no communications and petitions this week, no notice of motions, no bylaws, and no closed session. May we have a draft motion for the confirmation bylaw, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Bard, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2026-016, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on Wednesday, January 28, 2026, be passed in open council on the 28th day of January 2026.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 4:43 p.m.
Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. And once again, thank you, staff, and Mr. Binns and Ms. Johnson for a great report. Everyone have a great week, and hopefully it warms up soon.